This is Your Other Brothers Podcast.
Welcome, friends, to Your Other Brothers Podcast, navigating faith, homosexuality, and masculinity together. From the Jewel of the Blue Ridge, my name is Tom. I'm so glad you're here. Thanks for being here tonight, whatever time it is. Joining me today, this is an amazing episode. Joining me today from the mid-best or the mid-worst, you decide. It's our brother Dean. What's up, Dean?
What's up, guys? I'm definitely going to go with the mid-best.
Mid-best. Dean, it's been forever. How long has it been since you've been on this podcast? We need to figure that out and correct that. But we are correcting that.
We are correcting that. Yeah, right now. And I don't remember what the last podcast I would have talked on been. So, whoops.
Well, it's definitely your first one of the decade. So, happy 2020 to you, my brother Dean.
Thank you. Happy 2020 to you as well, Tom.
But speaking of somebody who hasn't been on the podcast in a while, from the land of enchantment, let's go to our brother Matt. What's up, Matt?
What up?
Matt, I don't even want to think about how long it's been since you've been here.
It's been a year and a few months. That's how long has it been. I looked at the thing and I was like, I haven't been on here for a very good while. What's up with that, Tom?
What's up with that? I don't know. Times change and things get away from me. And all of a sudden it's 2020. And yeah, Matt hasn't been on since 2019, 2018 now at this point. I don't know. It's been a hot minute. So this is like, we're bringing back the oldies. Y'all are two of the OGs along with me of Your Other Brothers. So this is really cool to we're bringing the gang back together.
Oh, yeah. The original crew. What?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm still disappointed in you, Tom, right now. So.
For y'all that don't know, Matt's sense of humor is very sarcastic and blunt, and so we just got to get through it. For all the other sensitives out there listening, we just need to power through.
I don't know that was a joke, Tom. I think he actually might be disappointed in you. Just going to throw that out there.
Yeah, it's 50-50 right now. So
I'm choosing to look at it through the lens of a joke, but you're right. It very well may not be. So we're just going to, nonetheless, move forward with this episode. And the reason, we're bringing the old crew back together for lots of reasons, but one of them being, Matt, you have a story. You have a unique and beautiful and messy, but ultimately beautiful story that I feel like our current listenership has missed out on. And so we're going to tell some of your story today. And Dean and I are going to be here as well to chip in our thoughts and our stories. But we're talking about gay sex and hookups. This was
Yay.
Thank you.
Hookups like
an audible response, but
was hookups like it's like HDMI or like VGA to HDMI.
Yeah. Hold on, don't
USB.
spoil our sponsor. We have a sponsor coming later in this episode.
Oh my gosh!
So I don't
forgot
want
about
to
this.
steal their thunder. But So what I'm calling this, on the heels of us doing our pornography episode, I called it a quote unquote classic episode because we did these first run of episodes back in the day, and they're no longer available, sadly, but we always have this opportunity to go back and redo and dive back into these episodes in new dynamic ways. And so I wasn't necessarily expecting to do back-to-back classic episodes, but it worked out that way with our scheduling and the way things work, that we're diving into another classic episode with Matt, because this was one of our first, 10 or 15 episodes we did. I forget what number it was, but we did this episode on gay sex and hookups, and Matt, you shared a lot of your story, and you were super vulnerable, and I'm counting on that same enchanting vulnerability here today, if you're prepared to share.
Yeah, I'm definitely prepared to share.
Well, like I said, y'all, this is really exciting to have you guys, because y'all have been blogging from the beginning along with me and a couple others, and so it's really cool just to have y'all's voices on this podcast today. Dean, though, I am admittedly sad because when we planned this episode like a week or two ago, and the plan was you were supposed to be standing right across from me. This is a two-way microphone, and you could literally be standing 8 inches away from me right now. What
I
happened,
know.
Dean?
A stupid snowstorm in Ottawa, Ontario is what happened. I was up there for work, and I was supposed to fly back on a Friday, and then fly out to Asheville on Saturday. And because of the snowstorm, they canceled my flight, and the next available one wasn't until the next afternoon. And they were it wasn't going to work out for even me to get straight to Asheville, so they had to just put me into St. Louis like 24 hours later than I was supposed to be. And so they gave me credit back for that flight to Asheville, so now I just have to reschedule that flight to come back down there. But I ended up back in the Midwest a few days earlier than I was supposed to be.
Sooner than you thought, yeah.
Sooner than I thought.
I was disappointed, but it's also, you know what? This could work out well. Like if and when you come back to visit, I think the weather will be nicer probably, and maybe it'll just be all for the best.
Yeah, and I feel like you said if when. It's going to be when. This is the third time I've been kept from coming to see you.
I just have, it's been a couple of times. Yeah, a couple of times where it just hasn't worked out. So I don't know. I'm hopeful though.
I'm very hopeful. At some point, I'm just going to drop everything and drive to you and just show up at your front door and be like, please let me in.
Yeah, why don't you just swing by the Land of Enchantment, pick up Matt, and on the way, and then just all three of us can hang out.
Oh, that's
honestly, I wouldn't mind. I really wouldn't mind that. I kind of like a good road trip, and I know me and Dean would have like a pretty good, awesome road trip together.
Yeah,
we would honestly probably talk about a lot of gay sex and everything. It'd be awesome.
Most likely, yeah.
Save it for the podcast, y'all.
We're on the podcast, Tom.
Podcast. I know. Well, I'm glad, Dean. I'm glad you made it back. I'm glad your plane didn't go down. I'm glad you're not stranded in Ottawa. I've been to Ottawa. Actually, Ottawa's pretty cool. It's a capital city. Did you get out and about? Did you stroll the town?
I went out and about, yeah. I went out and about.
Yeah.
I had my loonies and my toonies with me so I could go anywhere.
No, it was very Scottish what you just said, but continue.
I made an attempt. No, it was awesome. I loved Ottawa. It was my first time ever, and I genuinely loved it. So honestly, I want to go back just to explore. I was there for work, so I didn't get to do a lot. I did get to go to Winterlude a little bit. I got to walk and see some of the ice sculptures that were out. But I would love to go back just to explore the downtown, actually visit some of the parts like the Parliament building, the Supreme Court building. I would love to see some of those. Visit some of the embassies, and just in general actually get to spend more time just walking around and enjoying the city. But it was a little bit cold, and there were some protesters, so that kind of inhibited some of the sightseeing.
Do Canadians protest? Canadians are a very nice breed of people. It's hard for me to imagine them protesting.
They were protesting. They're a little bit not happy about some things, and so there was a crowd of about 200 protesters walking down the middle of the road while I was at a Starbucks. And I have pictures to prove it. I took the pictures in the video, just so this will not be posted with the blog or with the podcast. I apologize, but
they exist. Trust us.
They do exist.
A huge shout out to our Canadian listenership. We have a good number of Canadian listeners, so hooray, y'all. You've been mentioned on this episode thanks to Dean's travel exploits from the last week.
And if you are from Canada, please, I would love feedback on my attempt at a Canadian accent. Please tell me how bad I was.
Matt, you have ties to Canada too, don't you? Don't you have like connections to Canada, family?
Yeah. I mean, my parents were, so my parents were missionaries up in Canada in the British Columbia province. So they were missionaries to the First Nations people up there. So because my family is Native American, and of course the First Nation is basically the indigenous people up there. It was pretty good. We got to see different tribes / bands up there, how they do their ceremonies and traditional stuff, and it was pretty eye-opening. So I loved it. My parents loved it. My whole family loved it. And shout out to all the First Nations up there.
Shout out to the First Nations and all Native peoples of this land. Okay. We're going to move on. We had a serious moment of just like welcoming our diverse listenership to the show. Thank you for being here. Well, y'all, I want to waste no time because I want to get right into Matt's story. So
Don't forget sponsorship.
I know. Hold on, Matthew, I've done 57 of these things. I know what I'm doing.
Yeah, and you forgot
Wow.
one.
So hold on. Before we get to sponsorship, Matt, aren't you curious if we've picked up any new Apple Podcast ratings and reviews since the last episode?
Sure, let's go for it.
Absolutely. I'm excited for this one because this one has emojis in the subject line. I didn't know you could do that. I think this is the first Apple Podcast review we've gotten that has emojis in the subject line. I just saw it and it popped off the screen. I was like, whoa. It's the little tri-star emoji. Y'all know that one? There's like 3 little stars. Anyway, it exists. You can look on the emojis. There's 3 little stars. And the subject line says, all the stars in the heavens. And this is from Phil. So Phil left us this review, 5-star rating review on Apple Podcasts. He said, I've listened to this podcast and followed this ministry for the past 2 years, and it has been fantastic. So real, so vulnerable, so helpful. I believe this is a must listen for any male who struggles with sexuality. There's no doubt that God placed this ministry in my life at the exact moment when I needed it. Simply the best. And that just makes me smile. Thank you so much, Phil. Thanks for sharing that.
Thank you, Phil. Question, is he Phil from the future or just Phil?
He wrote it in the past. So technically he's Phil from the past.
Phil from the past.
And he's been lurking for 2 years. It took him 2 years to write this review. That's no shade. I'm just stating the fact that it was a 2-year journey. And that's actually a good segue because what I want to always encourage people is whether you've been listening to this show for 2 years or 2 days, if you find meaning and value and significance in what we do, you're taking the time to write us a review and give us a rating. That really does go a long way. So it's never too late. We joke with Jacob and Ryan all the time that they've still yet to leave us a rating review. Dean and Matt, I'm not going to ask if you've left us a rating review. At this point, I feel like it's kind of silly if one of the authors or one of the podcast voices leaves our own show a rating review. I mean, technically it's allowed. Who's going to say no? But anyway, with Jacob and Ryan, though, it's different because they started out as listeners and followers, whereas y'all joined this effort with me from the beginning. So I feel like y'all are off the hook. Jacob and Ryan, you're still on the hook. But yeah, we hit 110 now. We're up to 110 ratings, reviews. That's really awesome for any show to get that much. So thanks for all the support. You can go to Apple Podcasts and find our show. If you're not already listening to this on Apple Podcasts, we'd love the love. Really appreciate it. And a big shout out also, not only to everyone who supports us through the rating review system, but everyone who supports us on Patreon. You are the reason why this thing still exists. Thank you so much for your monthly contributions. We're well over 100. I'm trying to remember, like 175, 100. I think we actually crossed 180 patrons recently. So that's amazing. Thank you guys all over the world, Canada included. Thank you so much for your patronage. If you're interested in becoming a patron, you can go to patreon.com/yourotherbros. You can get all the information there about how this whole thing works. And finally, you guys, we definitely need to thank the sponsor for this episode on hookups. When they heard we were talking about hookups, Washer Dryers came to the rescue. Washer Dryers said, we'll step in and clean your stuff and dry your stuff with your hookup. And they're here to hook us up with a sponsorship. So thank you, Washers and Dryers.
Oh my gosh. The disappointment I wish like the yobbers could see on my face right now.
I wish I could see on your face. All I see is a black screen because you're out in the middle of the desert recording this right now.
Yes, I am. And it's
You
nighttime.
literally are. Yeah. Paint the scene. Why don't you? Tell the listeners where you are right now.
Well, okay. So, I mean, I could, but I sent you guys a little something. So I think you, Tom, are a better storyteller and kind of a picture painter type of thing than me. So why don't you describe what I sent you? What does it look like from your perspective?
Matt, he described, the first thing he described was your pants.
Oh my gosh, that's true.
Matt sent us a group text. He sent us a picture of his windshield, like out of his car. And when I looked down, because I was trying to do 7 things, getting the call up and running and getting things recorded, I looked down and I just see like a blue V shape, and it looks like a crotch, if I'm being honest, just from a quick
Oh my
glance.
gosh. Okay, all
And
right.
I thought it was
Since
just like a mistake of he accidentally sent us a picture of his crotch, but it's actually like sunset. It's actually quite nice. It's a sunset sky, and half the sky is dark blue and half the sky is light blue, and it looks like a V and it looks like a crotch to me. But that's just where my mind was at.
Okay, so all right, since he can't really paint a good picture, so what I'm doing is, yes, I'm sitting in my car because I don't have privacy where I live at. So I am actually seeing the sunsets. It's getting darker, but of course you have your dark blue clouds, sky, whatever. And then in the middle, you have your red, yellow, orange sunset out in the distance. And I see the city where I live out. The lights are out, and it's beautiful right now. But what these guys are seeing is basically a black screen, and yeah. So I'm sorry, you guys, that you can't really see me, but not sorry.
It's okay. Yeah, thank you for checking in, Matt. I'm sorry that you have no privacy. It would have been great to hear you talk about all these things today from the comfort of your home, but I understand if that's a little awkward and not doable.
Yeah, it'll be very awkward for my family.
Yeah, hopefully this call works, because I do remember the last episode we had you on, you were also outside somewhere. I don't know if you were where you are currently or if you were somewhere else, but I remember it started hailing, and some of our recording, like you can hear like hail hitting your like the roof of your car as you're talking. It was quite dramatic. So we'll see how well this call holds up.
Yeah, that was during monsoon season, and good thing it's not monsoon season. It's winter, and there's no rainy clouds or any clouds of hail or whatever to that effect. So I am in the clear. So
is monsoon season, is that not just like for the South Pacific? Like there's no way that there's a monsoon season in the southwestern United States.
Actually, there is in New Mexico.
I refuse to believe that.
Shocking.
I know, right?
Anyway, we've painted the scene for you all, and Matt is here to once again talk to us about gay sex and hookups. And we're not just calling it that because to be provocative. I mean, I guess if I'm being honest, that's part of it, is to like be an attention grabber of a title. Like, yes, that's an attention grabber. I'm not stupid. I'm not gonna pretend it's not. But there's like that is a big part of your story, is it not, Matt?
Yeah, it definitely is. And I mean, I'm not going to lie or anything like that. And you guys know me pretty well. I'm pretty a blunt person, and I'm basically a straight talker, per se. And yeah, so I'm going to do my best to try not to be so blunt, but at the same time, tell what happened to me through the years of just basically walking with Christ, and my downfalls and failures and all this and that. So it should be a pretty good episode.
Yeah. Matt, I think you have the record when you're talking about being blunt and direct and things. I'm pretty sure it's not even a close contest that of all the bloggers on our site, you have the record for like the most exclamation points. You're just a very enthusiastic
I'm a very intense person, and I'm a very passionate person, you could say. Yeah.
But through your love of the Enneagram, you are learning self-awareness, and you're learning how to better yourself, right?
Yeah, unfortunately I am, and I hate that about myself right now.
Yes. Matt is like our only 8 that's can be seen for miles in our community. We actually have, so in our Yobbers group on Facebook, we have an Enneagram poll thread, and far and away our most popular types are 2, 4, and 9. We have so many 2s, 4s, and 9s. But you scroll all the way down to the bottom of the poll, and there's literally one, there's 1 8. And I feel so bad for this one person in our group. But yeah, this is a different slant. I mean, maybe I'm sure there's got to be other 8 listeners listening, but yeah, this is adding more diversity to the well. You get a lot of 2, 4, and 9 action between me, Jacob, Dean, and Ryan. So yeah, you get a different flavor today with Matt. So that's really exciting.
Mm-hmm. And all of you guys better be grateful for an 8 here that's talking.
Oh, we are. Are we not, Dean?
I mean, I'm a 2, so when I regress, I bring out some of the 8 tendencies, and that can always be entertaining. But I always appreciate. I think that's why Matt and I get along, because he's like me when I regress, so I don't have to get unhealthy. I just have to tell him something, and then his reaction is what I would want to do, and it's amazing.
Yeah, and yeah, I love that about you, Dean. So again, as you said, that's probably the reason why we work well together. So sorry, Tom, that you're basically a loner right there.
I am a loner, but that's okay. I have
Fours love being
friends.
loners.
Yeah, I'm right in my element. Exactly. That's cool. So that's cool that you can like vent to Matt, Dean, and then Matt. When you're growing, you become more like Dean. You become more altruistic and caring and lovable, huggable. Even you're so great when you're healthy.
That's debatable on the hugs. So I'm okay. So Yobbers, I am not a hugger, really. I mean, I do, unless it's like if somebody's doing it like automatically unexpected, I hate it. If I initiate it, then it's okay.
Yes. I'm just grateful that you've initiated hugs with me. It hasn't been like plentiful, but there have been at least 1 or 2 times where you've initiated, and that just warms my heart. So thank
Well,
you.
I haven't killed you yet, so yeah.
And that's the baseline level, is death.
Baseline, no death
Yes.
yet, so we're on a win right now. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Very well, very well. So anyway, yes, we're talking about a large part of Matt's story, which involves gay sex and hookups, and we're going to talk about that. Full disclosure, I've never had gay sex. I've never had a physical hookup. So this is all like foreign to me, but I always love learning. I love hearing where other people come from and stories very different from mine. And so that's what I appreciate about you, Matt, is not only the not so great stuff, the things that have been hard and the things that have been struggles, but yeah, just the chance to share vulnerably and hear from you and be encouraged by your walk with the Lord. It's always a blessing for me.
Yeah, and it's always a blessing just to tell my story and how it can help other people and basically help them to understand themselves, better themselves, and not only that, better their walk with Christ. And I think there's a lot of people who don't aren't authentic, and they just go wandering around, and they don't. Unfortunately, they kind of lie to themselves, and they don't actually deal with what they need to deal with, and from there grow and be healthy, and as I said before, better themselves.
Well then, Matt, why don't you just start us off? Like, I don't know, just like a quick I don't know, just like a quick minute summary. Like, kind of how did your
Give us a quickie.
give us a quickie. How did your story begin? Like, so pre ever having sex, like, I don't know, like what were your thoughts about sex? What was your opinion of hookup culture? Just like from the outside looking in before you stepped into that yourself, like what was kind of going through your head and in your heart?
Well, I grew up as a pastor's kid. I'm a PK. My dad was a pastor.
PK.
And through that, yeah, shout out to all the PKs who are listening. Woo woo. Okay, so yeah. Anyways, I viewed sex under the umbrella of the church, and like, hey, this is scary. It's dangerous. Sex is bad. All this stuff, and growing through all of that with that mindset, I didn't want like anything to do it with sex really. But unfortunately, through my teenage years, I stumbled upon pornography, and that kind of I think that's what kind of started the desires to possibly have sex with like another guy. And then once college hits, kind of secretly got like a boyfriend, started dating someone, and then unfortunately he was going to be my first, but he cheated on me, and he was going to be my first, but I hooked up with another person, and then that's where it started. And if you guys want to read more on that, I wrote a blog post like years ago of telling that story of my first hookup.
Yeah, and throughout this episode, I'm sure you'll reference, and I even may reference some of your blog posts as they come to mind because you've written a lot. I mean, you two, both of you guys have written a bunch. I feel like in this room, the three of us, we're no joke, we must account for like 75% of the blogs. Granted, Dean is like 60%.
Yeah,
all on his stuff. But Matt and I, we've shared our weight as well as far as the blog load goes. But But yeah, we'll link all of these in the episode notes and descriptions if y'all feel like clicking along and checking out some of Matt's story if you've never checked it out before.
So Matt, you said the first time, so after your boyfriend cheated on you, that's when you met up with a guy. Was that kind of how, I guess that was that the start of kind of the serial hookups, or was that, is that who introduced you to the idea of just the regular hookups?
I would say it would probably be both. That was my introduction to hookup, and like that person was like, as you said, like he was like the start of like everything. And I mean, I definitely remember like all the details of that, and yeah. So I mean, through that's how everything started. And I mean, like almost like 10 years of just like hookups and sex and all that stuff. Like,
So Matt, when you were growing up in a Christian culture, being a PK, you mentioned just like sex. Like, correct me if I'm wrong. Did you have like a sex negative view of things? Like, was it a thing of like, I'm not gonna have sex till I get married, or I'm just like turned off by sex altogether, or like I'm trying to like, let's start off with the sex component and figure out. I'd like to learn more about like just your thoughts and feelings about sex, and then we'll start kind of morphing that discussion into hookups and hookup culture.
yeah, I had a negative view of sex, that it was bad, to save sex for marriage, just your typical Christian culture stuff. And I didn't view it as like I'm never going to have sex. I knew I wanted to have sex with like a potential wife in the future. But unfortunately, because of course, the majority of this room, we have same-sex attraction. So it's just kind of like you gravitate more of like wanting to have sex with like the same sex. And through that, it was just like, okay, like you deal with shame, guilt of having these thoughts, having these feelings, and then like you kind of isolate yourself. And I mean, it's already bad when you like isolate yourself, to not talk to anybody about what's happening with you growing up, like through puberty, through high school, whatever. And you have this mindset of just like, sex is evil. If I have sex, like in the back of your mind, it's like, I'm going to die type of thing. I mean, yes, that's like an extreme thing, but there are people who have those thoughts. And like, if they do, then I definitely get you guys. I definitely understand like that concept.
So then walk us through, because I don't know if I'm trying to think if in our conversations, Matt, I'm sure you've told me about your first boyfriend, but I'm sure stories, details will come back to me as you share. But tell us about that, like just as far as finding a boyfriend, and like you mentioned, like he was a secret boyfriend, right? Is that what you said?
Yeah, he was like a secret boyfriend. I met him through college classroom, started talking to each other. He was also, well, he claimed that he was a Christian. And of course you have that like sense of like, hey, this dude might possibly be gay, or like has SSA or something like that, same sex attraction. Like the whole like gaydar thing like popped out. And me and him started hanging out some more. And through that, it's like we started hanging out a little bit more. He lived on campus, I lived on campus. And it only like lasted like 6 months. And there's a lot of stuff that I don't remember, but I remember just like kind of the feelings of being with him. It was very exhilarating. It was very passionate of just like having these feelings towards this person. And in my mind, it like makes sense. It made sense of like, I'm supposed to be with this person.
So then like, what were your thoughts on, as the relationship, got more serious, as you hung out more, as you connected more with this person? Like, what were your thoughts on, well, I guess it's a two-part question. Like, what were your thoughts on sex as the relationship grew? Because you mentioned that you wanted him to be your first. So I want to hear more about that. But then simultaneously, what was your relationship with the Lord at this time? Was it still on track? Did you feel like it wasn't a part of your life anymore? Did you feel like they were conflicting lives at the same time? Did you feel like they were synchronized lives at the same time? Like, what were your thoughts and feelings there?
Yeah, I going through that, tackling the first question. As we started getting to know each other more, I was like, I knew in my mind, like, okay, this person's gonna be like the first person that I have sex with. I'm gonna like, she's gonna take my V card. So
Is that what they call that?
yes, that's what they call it, Tom.
Okay.
Grow up.
You have to educate
yeah.
me. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, that's what happens when you live with conservative parents. So I'm sorry, Tom.
Men have penises, and other
Yeah.
men have penises,
Yeah.
and one penis kisses the other.
Okay. What y'all didn't
Okay.
see at home was the finger diagram that just came on my screen. Continue, Matt.
Okay. Anyways, we started like getting more intimate, and we had this talk like, hey, it's like I want you to be my first, and we were going to plan this out, and unfortunately, like an ex from his past came up in his life, and one day he just messaged me, texted me, and says like, hey, I was hanging out with like my ex, and unfortunately we had sex, and that broke my heart, and it was like, what the heck. And I called him, and I was just, of course, crying and everything. He's like, how could you do this to me? And he apologized like 100 times over, but I didn't want to do anything with him. And in a way, my first hookup was kind of like a revenge against him, but at the same time, like I wanted to feel like what it was like to have like gay sex or a hookup. So that was that. The second part of the question, I would say it was conflicting. When I was going to college my freshman year, that was a decision where I didn't want to do anything with church. I mean, I grew up as a pastor's kid, so of course you go to church like every Sunday, and you have to do church stuff like almost every single day. And you grow up with a dad who's a pastor, so you grow up in a Christian culture. So I wanted to do my own stuff, but unfortunately, I lived with an older brother, and he forced me to go to church. And during that time, he says like, hey, when you're in this household, we're going to go to church. You have no say. I'm your older brother, and you're going to do what I say. And of course, since him being an older brother, him being stronger, it's like, all right, fine. And through that, I was also kind of that passion of wanting to know Jesus reignited. And it was very conflicting because I wanted to do my own thing, but at the same time, I wanted to follow Jesus. And unfortunately, I couldn't mend those two together. So it was a very conflicting time as well.
So after that first hookup, I mean, you talked about this conflict in the faith. How did it feel in that moment? And then what was it that led to the next hookup that kind of kept you on that path?
So after I got done with like my first hookup, I felt numb. And I remember I was working as a janitor for like a theater, and it was early in the morning. I hooked up. He took me to my work, and then from there, I was getting ready. I was gonna clean the bathroom, and then I just like had to sit down, like of course, like on the toilet, and just like process what happened. But at the same time, it was like, well, that wasn't that bad. Like I don't feel anything. Like I'm supposed to feel like this, like gnawing in my soul, in my stomach. I'm supposed to feel bad. It's supposed to feel like ugly and all this stuff. Like, but I don't feel anything. But I do remember how it felt in the moments of like that passionate euphoria type of feeling. And for those who have hooked up in the past, like for you listeners and readers, you guys understand what I'm talking about, and you guys understand like that passionate feeling of like when you're like in that moment, like it feels so good that you don't want to give it up. And once it's done, you're just like, okay, well, I'm done with my business, and I need to go back to reality, to the normal scene and all that stuff. But that feeling that wanting that euphoria part always sticks with you. That's the reason why, for myself, I wanted to get that back. It's that's basically how the best way I could describe it. One of the reasons why I wanted to hook up with many different people. Not only that, but of course, like you have your types of people that you are attracted to. And from there, like if you see a person, it's like, hey, I want to sleep with that person, or I want to have sex with that person. And that desire of wanting to hook up with that person comes back again. And it comes back again after you're done with the first one, the second one, the third one. And like you want to try, it's basically you're trying to, you want to try different types of food. And it's basically an appetizer. And all of them are good. But at the same time, there's also new food that is coming out. And from there, you want to like take a piece or take like that food and like try it out, and it feels good. All right, you have your favorite. All right, well, that favorite's good, but I want to try this one. So that's like the best way I can describe like the reasons why I didn't want to stop.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I remember, I think fairly early into your blogging, Matthew, like one of your first several posts that you wrote. I forgot the title of it right off the top of my head, but again, it'll be linked in the episode. But you talked about your, like it might have actually just been called "Why I Love Sex" or "The Reason Why I Love Sex" or something. Do you know that? Do you know the blog I'm talking about?
Yeah, the reason. Yeah.
So like I said, like this intersects with my story a little bit, in the sense that I've never had sex, and my entire life, and including right now, sex sounds scary. It doesn't sound exciting. It doesn't sound appealing. It sounds completely vulnerable and horrific. If I'm just being honest, like that's just my shelteredness, I guess, speaking out. But I think you mentioned somewhere in that blog and in your story, like you mentioned the notion that you weren't sure if you could have sex or if you would enjoy it, just like the physical aspect of it. So like, well, could you talk about that a little bit? Because I'm curious just to learn more about just like what your first time was like. And this isn't to be salacious, and this isn't to just like, trigger people. Like I really am honestly curious about, but yeah, your feelings, your capabilities about sex, and any anxieties that you might have had going into your first time. Like I'd love to just hear more about that.
Yeah, I mean, of course, before like you have like your first. You have anxiety, you're not too sure about like how it's going to feel, and like you basically in that moment when you're going to like do the act, like you have goosebumps, and like inside of you have like a knot in your stomach, and like you have you're trembling a little bit, but you're trying to compose yourself so you could like do what you need to do with this other person. And all of that stuff was going through my mind. I was like, in my mind, I was like, all right, like, let's do this. I don't know how it feels after this. Like, let's get this thing over with. And when you're in the moment, like, at the very first start, like your body tenses, and then the other person is like trying to like calm you down and like talk you through it. And through that, you kind of relax a little bit more. And then from there, it happens, and it's like, okay, this feels good. It feels all right. I'm enjoying this a little bit. All right, I'm enjoying this a little bit more. Okay, I'm enjoying it right now. Okay, this isn't bad. And then from there, like once you're done, it's like, all right, it's like, well, the deed is done. It wasn't that bad. And it's kind of like how you're going on your very first roller coaster. You have all these like feelings, like I don't know about this. I'm scared. All this stuff. And then when you go on your very first roller coaster, you go down the first slope, and then like that feeling in your stomach like happens, and then like you go through it, and then you're done, and it's like, wow, it's like that was amazing. It's like that was basically how I felt. It took me maybe like 2 or 3 days to finally like comprehend what happened, and it was like, okay, like that really felt amazing. I want to do that again.
Wow. Comparing things to like food and buffets and roller coasters, you're really breaking out all the metaphors here tonight, Matt.
I mean, that's the only way I could describe it without getting into like the details.
Yeah. No, I appreciate that.
Is it like a wooden roller coaster or a metal roller coaster? Or does it depend on who you're hooking up with?
Depends on who you're hooking up with. So, like, of course, metal, like, it has its stuff and you don't like it and, like, tosses you into, like, throws you all about. And then, of course, your steel, it's very smooth and all that stuff. So it just depends. So, yeah, thanks for asking that.
Want to clarify that? Like, is it Scream Machine or Ninja? Like at Six Flags, which one? Am I going to get a headache afterwards, or
Or throw up.
Yeah, depends on the person. That's all I'm gonna say. It just depends on who you're with. So that's a joke, everybody. So you guys don't have to like send us hate mail.
Please email all hate mail to tom@yourotherbrothers.com.
That's fine. I can handle it. Dean, did you have any other questions about just the sex component before we start going down the hookup conversation route? You've had sex.
I have. I've had sex with men and women. So I'm like the in between of this because I wasn't. And actually, men and I've talked about our reactions to sex. Because like the feeling he's talking about, like after the first time, I remember. After my first time doing anything with a guy, there was that sense of like feeling numb and just being like, what just happened? Because I grew up similarly, which with a conservative, negative view of sex. And actually mine was so much that I didn't even know like if sex was ever supposed to happen. Like I thought all sex was a sin, even in marriage, but it was just like, oh well, sometimes it's gonna happen, but if it has to happen, make sure you're married. Like really conservative, really negative view of sex. And so for me, like the first time I did anything with a guy, um, we fooled around. It was definitely further than I had ever thought I would go with anybody, and I do remember that sense of feeling numb. But at the same time, after it kind of settled down, I was just like, man, when can I try some of these things again? Can I have another go? Can I do more? And so I understand that conflict because I'm thinking, wait, everything I've believed for my whole life up to this point feels like it's wrong because I thought that the moment anything sexual happened, I was supposed to be like struck by lightning, or the earth was supposed to swallow me whole, or I was supposed to like immediately die on the spot from worms eating me inside out. Like I had all these like catastrophic ideas, and it just didn't happen. And so Matt and I've talked before because for me, I was, even though I had the sense of numb and then the sense of I wanted to do it again, I was always so cautious because I had a much stronger negative reaction. Uh, that would usually afterwards I would end up feeling more depressed than before, and so the feelings of depression far outweighed any sort of satisfaction I ever got from the experience. Which is why for me, like I, it had to be a guy that I knew, and it had to be something that we kind of fell into, rather than something I went out seeking, per se.
So that's interesting. So y'all y'all obviously have the similarity as far as sharing that experience, not together but separately. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think everybody knows that, Tom.
I would hope that that's clear. Okay.
Matt is adorable, and I love him. And
No.
Thank you, by the way.
You're welcome. If I had hooked up with you, Matt, I would feel honored. Like I would if I had hooked up with you.
But the point I was trying to make before I insinuated that y'all have hooked up is that
By the way, everybody, it's another joke. So again, no hate mail.
but the fact that y'all have had sex with other men, it's very interesting, like the approach, like the way you just verbalized that, Dean, about the kinds of men that you would seek out versus Matt, the kind of men that you then sought out, which I think that's a great segue into kind of extending that story a little bit. Like, so you had sex this first time after your boyfriend cheated on you, and then you had revenge sex with just a random guy. Is that right? It was just someone random. Okay. Did you have, so you mentioned a little bit of the fallout of that, of like processing it, sitting on a toilet in a bathroom and just processing things like in that immediate aftermath, like those first 24 to 48 hours, was this something that you thought you would experience in the near future, in the far future? Were you already starting to have that desire to do it again and experience it further? Like what was going through your head, I guess, in that, those first couple days?
Yeah, I wanted to do that again. But unfortunately, the person that I was with, he had a schedule. He was working. He was pretty busy. So when we did it, it was kind of like it had to be like not really quick, but it was kind of like a perfect timing for him. And then after that, like he had a pretty busy life, so I couldn't go back to him. So I was like, all right, well, I've done it with this person and I've experienced sex and I know how it feels. And like, I want to do this again. This like hunger, like my sex drive, like was now like pretty open. It was wide open. So I was like, all right, let's try another person. And then from there, that's when I started searching for other people. And then from there, it was just like, it kind of, you could say, kind of got out of control.
Was there ever for you like a relational component to it? Like when you sought out these other guys and you mentioned it like a as like a smorgasbord, like a food buffet, like trying out different things. Like was there any part of you that wanted to be in relationship with these guys, or was it strictly for the physical act, the physical sensation, and that yeah, just going through that with all these different people?
Yeah, there. I think because of like my previous relationship, my first boyfriend, it made it to the point where I didn't want to have like any relationship with these guys. It was strictly physical, and it was just strictly almost like a one and done thing, and then move on to the next person. I think that really affected how I viewed other people because I didn't trust them. If I got into in a relationship, they're going to break my heart. So I had this mindset of like, okay, I'm going to hook up with this person. If we hook up multiple times, then sure, like we're kind of friends with benefits type of thing. But as a strictly a loving same-sex relationships, like no, it's like I'm not going to go down that path. I've been there once before, and it broke my heart, and I just want to stay this as like a friendship. And of course, through the years that I hooked up, I've had multiple friends who I've had sex with, but we never had an actual relationship. It was just like a buddy thing. And for me, that was pretty normal. And it wasn't awkward for myself. It wasn't awkward for the other person on the other side. And like we would go to like the movie theaters, and then we'll get done. It's like, all right, let's go back to your house. And then from there, it's like, all right, let's go have sex. And then we do it. And it's like, okay, well, I'm going to go home and then I'm going to do my stuff. It's like, all right, well, I'm going to stay here and do my stuff. We would text and like have like like a buddy thing. And it's like, hey, hey, I'm going to be alone. So you want to come over? It's like, yeah, sure. And then we do our thing. And then after that, it was good, you could say.
Yeah, what is that like having those friendships, like where you are your buddies, your friends, also, hey, like you said, I'm alone tonight, want to have sex? Yeah, sure. I mean, how like does that develop through chemistry found during the sex? Is that developed through the chemistry found before and afterwards when you're just like, hey, we did this, let me get to know you? Since you're talking about it's not tied to like a romantic relationship, but it is tied, a regular hookups would be tied almost to like a friendship or some sort of mutual respect. I mean, how does that develop amidst the hookups?
Well, I would say it would depend on the person. It would definitely depend on the person. Every person was different. Sometimes we would form the friendship before, and then we would do it. Sometimes we would form the friendship during, and sometimes it would be afterwards. Again, it was very different from each person, and yeah, it's very interesting because again, for those who've been in my position, I bet they would attest to this of just like, hey, like you're in the act, but at the same time, like you're chit chat, like, and it's like, and you're making a joke and all this stuff, and but you're still performing sex. So with that, it's like, all right, that's like breaking the ice, and then or like you go before you're joking, you're talking, and then that's kind of like breaking the ice, and then or like you're done with the act afterwards, like okay, let me get to know this person, and then you just like lay in bed or you lay wherever or sit somewhere and like you're just like having like a normal conversation, and both of you guys are not like in an awkward position, and it's just fine. Yeah. So I mean that it again depends on the person.
Yeah, I will say it is interesting because I didn't. It's something that that was a part of sex I didn't really catch on to until I was married. Was the whole like the random chit chat you have like when you're having sex. You just talk about random things or make jokes. Like because that's not displayed in the culture. That's not displayed in porn. That's not displayed anywhere. But like there's a point when you get to know somebody and you find something's funny and you just make a joke and you're both laughing and it's just like, well, you're still having sex, but you're also talking about the jokes or the weather outside or the shopping or something like that.
Wow, I'm learning a lot.
Yeah, you're learning. Yeah, I mean, what you're describing is basically like how it was with like the friends that I used to like have sex with. So you're definitely on point, Dean.
This is really interesting because yeah, I guess I'll share this part of my story now because I've hinted at it. I've written various blogs about it. I've yet to like really flesh out this story entirely. My whole journey with promiscuity online. That's something I'm processing through in counseling still. I'm trying to, and I'm telling various friends about it as well. Because I've never had sex in person, I've engaged in inappropriate conversations over the internet with people and web chatting with people on the internet before. And I have this like simultaneous tug of war. And I think a lot of it is because I am such an emotional person. I'm sure Dean, you can probably relate with this more so than Matt, just by virtue of our personalities. But like I have this conflicting thing in me where I want to just like satisfy this carnal part of me and this part of me that just wants to experience this physical euphoria, for lack of a better word, this emotional euphoria, and just to like ignore the fact that this person has a name and this person has a family and this person has hopes and dreams and all these other dimensions that we all have. And then there's this other part of me that can't ignore that wants to like pursue that more and wants to have those repeated engagements with the same person and to basically build some sort of a relationship with, although it's kind of an off-kilter relationship. It's certainly not a healthy one the way I've engaged with some certain people. So I don't know. I'm curious, Matt, just like in your story, like, I don't know, is it just easier? Is it easier for you to separate, I guess, the physical act from the friendship? Because it sounds like through all of it, like, I don't know, you may or may not use the word friendship. I don't know what you do. You said friends with benefits, but like, is it easy for you to separate, I guess, the physical from the emotional or the relational? Are those intertwined in a complicated way for you, or is that just me? Because I get the sense that there are probably people listening who have engaged in multiple hookups, um, and I can see that, like, if that were me hearing your story, if that were me engaging with like either the same person or like dozens and hundreds of different people, like that would throw me through a lot of emotional vortexes and whirlwinds. And so I'm curious, just if at all, if that applies to you and your story.
Honestly, I think it would probably be more towards you. For me, I'm a very surprisingly, I'm a very friendly person, and I love to just like interact with people. I'm kind of an extrovert, and I in those situations, if I can sense a person is uneasy about stuff, for myself, I kind of have control of that scenario, that situation, and do my best to put that person at ease. And then from there, I think from there, like I kind of form a somewhat friendship with him. And then from there, we do our business and then it's done. Yeah, there are times where it's kind of like I do separate the emotion, friendship with the sex act. Um, I know I've done it many times because it was in my mindset. It's like, okay, I'm only here for one thing, which is sex, and then that's it. Other times, very few times, no, very often, I was like, okay, like this person is actually cool. He's very level-headed. He's very down to earth. I actually want to get to know him. So yeah, again, it depends on the person.
Well, I will say it's because I've had other friends and I've talked to other people that for them they don't have they're kind of like you, Matt. They can for them they're friendly, and for them sex is a way almost like of having a friendship. It's like part of friendship for them. It's a physical activity that they enjoy, and if someone else enjoys it, something they do together. And so the one friend that comes to mind, they've particularly had the thought of like, is something wrong with me because I can have sex with someone and it's just like it's part of being their friend. It's not like the romantic, the feelings, the emotional, all the squishing. And I've talked about them with it and just kind of encouraged them like, I mean, be healthy, be safe, try not to go against your beliefs, but at the same time, maybe understanding what sex looks like inside a romantic relationship, with that, knowing that that's how they approach it, that for them, there's definitely, it's more physical than emotional. Because Tom, I'm a little bit more like you. For me, it's going to be heavily emotional. In fact, I would prefer the emotion over the physical. I'm fine with just having the emotional and not having really any of the physical connection. Another reason why, like for me, sex always left me like it was super numb. Sex with another guy was always like super numbing and super just like the depression was more than the elation, because what I was really wanting was that emotional connection. And sometimes I felt like I was trading physical to get the emotional that I wanted. So I think it's just how we're made up, our personalities, our desires. I think it's just going to be a mixture of all those. And so for Matt, I don't feel like it's that unusual. I just think most people aren't going to be as honest about it because there's this idea that sex has to be completely emotional, and if you're not talking about the emotion of it, you're lying about how you really feel. And I don't think that's purely the case.
Yeah, I appreciate your honesty, Matt, just in sharing your vantage point and how you've experienced and processed all these things, all these experiences. How many times, Matthew, would you say that you have had sex?
Honestly, I've lost count after, I would say, 30. If you would ask me to guess, I definitely would say I probably would have slept within the past 10 years. I would have slept with almost like 100 different people.
Okay. Yeah, and I just want to give everyone a perspective, because I think that's what I would have guessed too, just from what I've heard of you sharing your story, that it was somewhere in that range. Because yeah, I just want us to have a picture of where your story has gone and where it is today. Matthew, basically saying that you've had sex with like at least 100 different guys, however many times you had, would you use the language of addiction or no? Have you been, or are you addicted to sex? Is that language you would use to describe it, or not so much?
Yes, I definitely would say addiction is there. And once you've done it so many times, the conviction of like, I don't know, with sex, it lessens. Sometimes it goes away, sometimes it doesn't. But whatever you're trying to do, like when you're trying to make that choice of like wanting wanting to stop, it's very hard to stop because your body is like is so used to like having sex like multiple times with multiple people, or just like the same person multiple times. And then you like that aching feeling, that urge is always going to be there. So I definitely would say like I probably am a sex addict. And when you're in that moment, like how a friend of mine would describe it was like, if you're ever in that moment, if you're ever put in that situation, like something automatically like snaps and it goes into like a auto mode. Like you're automatically know your body knows what it's going to do, and in a way you can't control your body. It's like, all right, I need to do this act, and you kind of go through the motions, and then when you're done, you're just like, crap. It's like, why the heck did I just do that? It's like I did not want to do that. It's like, and I was doing my best, like trying to not do this, but I did it anyways. And in that way, I definitely would say like there's probably an addiction to that. And I mean, it's not impossible to stop, but it's definitely, it's going to be hard.
Yeah, I mean, we were talking a little bit in the last episode about the brain and dopamine and like signals and pathways and all that sort of thing. And like, there's a science to it, absolutely. Like, I can relate with what you were saying with my online habits and the digital things. That moment where it's like I put myself in a situation that isn't good, and all of a sudden something just clicks in, something I didn't anticipate for 99% of that day, and all of a sudden I'm just in front of my computer and something clicks into place, and And I can relate with that same exact wording that you used, basically to describe having sex. Like that's the exact same patterns I can use to describe myself with the things I've done on the internet and online, and I'm sure plenty of people listening too, whether they use the language of addiction or not. I know that's up to everyone to figure out for themselves, and I'm still trying to figure out for myself to be quite honest. But as far as what to call it, what to name it, and then how to deal with it, how to how to move forward. That's something that I kind of wanted to. I know we've like this conversation's gone so fast, but I just want to hear, Matt, just like what's the update for today, and what's like been your journey through it. So your journey of all the hookups and repeated sex, some with new people and some with the same people. Like I don't know, was there any kind of moment where you started to change course, or you started to, or like your relationship with God through the process over the last, I know this is like a big window, like the last 10 years, but can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah. I would say like the changing course would probably be like 4 or 5 years ago. So like 3 to 5 years ago. And from there, I knew I needed to do something different. And of course, like I would have sex, go to church, and all this stuff. And there was a lot of stuff that I went through. I mean, I've talked about like the times where I kind of quote unquote got kicked out of my church, and then like how my church told me that I couldn't be a leader, and because of stuff that I did in the past, that contributed to that. I went through like some depression, went through like STDs and all that stuff. And when you reflect on stuff like that, you have this like kind of like a snap moment, and you know what you need to do, and you want to live differently, and like you're kind of like in a way are tired of just like, okay, I need to get control of my own body, because like my body is controlling me, and right now it kind of sucks, but at the same time I don't want to stop, but I need to stop. And this, whatever I have or whatever I'm feeling, whatever I'm going through, isn't healthy. And through that, that's kind of like, I would say, that was kind of like a changing point of like slowly, it wasn't like an automatic thing. It was kind of like a slow process of like changing my mind, and then from there, acting upon that, wanting to change. And at the same time, like you live in a society where like sex rules everything. And it sucks because like the friends that you hang out with, like non-Christian friends, are like amping you up. It's like, hey, it's like, it's just sex. It's like, it's no big deal, especially in the gay community. So like, it's just sex. So you can sleep with whoever you want and wherever you want, whenever you want, and nobody's going to be there to judge you. But at the same time, you're a believer, and you have like this conscience inside of you, and you have the Holy Spirit inside of you, and you know what you're doing is bad. And it's interesting, because I thought about this quote, and I know I mentioned this before, but again, it's in the previous podcast that got deleted, and I wanted to share this with you guys before we ended this. This is from a pastor named Levi Lusko, and he wrote a book called Swipe Right. And this is one of the things that I took out of it about sex. And this is what he had to say. Today's secular perspective of sexuality is not just about the sex drive, but letting sex drive. The highest good is to feel good. Impulse control is not a hot commodity. We don't want to bow the knee to our sexuality to heaven and humbly say, thy will be done. We would rather claim that there is no God, so we can say, my will be done. And because of that, like I think that definitely hits the nail on the head of how like we view sex in today's society. And within that book, it talks about how sometimes sex means scars, and because of what you went through in your past with sex, it leaves scars. But those scars can it's not yes, it's definitely it's kind of impactful, and it gives you wounds, but you can heal from that. And in my life right now, where I'm at right now, I'm in the process of healing, and I think that's definitely a good thing. It's a long um, it's a long process. It hurts. It sucks. But with that, healing can come in your life and you can change your life. But again, there's gonna be times where you're gonna fall and you're going to like want to throw in the towel, and it's like, hey, it's like no more. It's like I don't want to go through this again. I don't want to go through like this healing process. It sucks. There's no process. I can't see anything. And just like, I don't know, like somebody working out in the gym, like they can't see progress of like your workout regimens and how you view your body. It's like, no, when other people see the stuff that you're dealing with and the stuff that you're trying to introduce in your life, healthy stuff, and stuff that's important to the Bible, and calling into, like, you could say, repentance, other people will notice. Although you don't notice, other people will notice. And then from the other people that watch you and they encourage you, like through those people, they're definitely the people, whether it be your friends, your church family, whatever, like they're the ones who will encourage you and who will help you to make that decision of like, hey, it's like, I don't want to do this. I don't want to have sex anymore with all these guys. Like, what I want to do, I want to stop. And I know there's a lot of people in this like situation that want to stop. I want to encourage you guys, like, hey, it's like, if you guys want to do this, if you guys want to like go on the straight and narrow, it is possible to stop. I'm in the process, and I know there's a lot of people of you guys want to stop. It is possible. It's gonna be hard, and you're gonna have like crappy days, and there are gonna be times where you're gonna quote unquote relapse. Keep going. I'm still going. You can do this, and I'm championing you guys on for those of you guys who want to stop. It's like there's definitely hope on the other side.
Oh, I'm starting to cry, Matthew. Because Matthew, your walk with Jesus is super inspiring to me, because despite, however many times, the dozens, hundreds, whatever, however, it doesn't matter, however many times you've had sex, or the many times you've wanted to stop, or the number of times you've relapsed, or whatever you want to call it, the fact that you keep getting up, and the fact that you're so radically like vulnerable, not only with other people. Like, there's a 3-layer to vulnerability here that I think is super worth noting, like coming to that terms to yourself. So like you reaching that moment 3 to 5 years ago, whenever it was, to where you snapped out of it, or whatever you want to call it, becoming vulnerable with yourself, then becoming vulnerable with God, and then becoming vulnerable with others and sharing that burden with other people. And like that's a huge starting point. In Romans 7, Paul confesses and vents his frustrations about his flesh and the war happening inside of him. In verse 15, he says, "For I do not understand my own actions, for I do not do what I want, but I do the very thing I hate. Now if I do what I do not want, I agree with the law that it is good. So now it is no longer I who do it, but sin that dwells within me. For I know that nothing good dwells in me, that is, in my flesh. For I have the desire to do what is right, but not the ability to carry it out. For I do not do the good I want, but the evil I do not want is what I keep on doing. Now if I do what I do not want, it is no longer I who do it, but sin that dwells within me. So I find it to be a law that when I want to do right, evil lies close at hand. For I delight in the law of God in my inner being. But I see in my members another law, waging war against the law of my mind and making me captive to the law of sin that dwells in my members. Wretched man that I am, who will deliver me from this body of death?" And so, my brothers, you whose body is a war zone, a daily, if not hourly, assault on yourself from within, you who feel dashed, crumpled, and crumbled Thanks be to God, through Christ, our Lord, our Savior, our Relator, our tower on Calvary, and our agonized in a midnight garden. He is with us in the war. He is bleeding in the battle. He has fought the impossible fight and won. And we too will see victory. It is here now, swirling in our midst. Let us take hold of our triumph. Let us confess and rise from our stumbles, our crashes, our addictions, again and again and again. The prize before us, our brothers and sisters alongside. Let us rise and let us go, giving thanks to our God, embracing our ultimate identity in Him with every step, more than mere conquerors, His.
Oh man, this has been an awesome episode. I feel like we got two benedictions. I mean, Matt, wow, thank you so much for sharing. Thank you so much for just everything. I mean, it's been awesome. And like Tom said, your story is incredible. And yeah, I can't help but think how powerful this is and what a great impact your story has had in the past and will continue to have as people continue to listen to this podcast and now download this one a ton over the next several decades.
Yeah, and another thing I want to add to this is for those who are listening to this, who are whether you're a pastor, you're a leader in the church, or somebody that your friends is telling you is like, hey, I want to be vulnerable and I want to say, is like, I've been having sex with multiple people. For you who are leaders and for those who are helping out, my advice to you is make sure that you check your heart, check your minds, be open to what that other person is telling you, because they're giving you an information that's that they can also take back because of how you respond, and also like just be ready for hard conversations, but at the same time, don't be critical of that person because they're basically giving you their hearts. And that's definitely going to be my challenge to leaders and church pastors and whatever. And for those who are again struggling with hooking up, try to find people who you can be open, vulnerable with, because those who are true friends, they'll definitely yes, it's going to hurt sometimes. Of like, I don't want to tell this person. It's like, no, you need to tell this person. It's good for you. It's good for me.
Yeah, this has been a great episode because it just again adds to the mosaic, the diversity of this community. Because hearing your story, Matt, it's I know that there are plenty of others in our community that are similar, that go along with it. People who would also describe themselves as sex addicts and people who feel like they just can't break these habits. And so it's like, hopefully an episode like this, it gives voice to other stories out there. I always want to be mindful of like bringing on alternating voices and new guests and just like add to this mosaic, because there is no one single story. There's so many out there. And so it's my hope that if you're listening out there, if you resonate with some of Matt's story and maybe even stuff that Dean and I shared, that's why we do what we do. It's like a huge reason why, is to let you guys know that you're not alone, and that there is a place for radical authenticity, vulnerability. And another way that you can add to the vulnerability and sharing your story is going to the podcast episode page at yourotherbrothers.com/podcast. We love it when our listeners share their story too. When you listen to our episode and you have a story to share, it really means a lot to hear where you guys are coming from. And we would love to hear from you. So if you have something that we said that rings true for you, or you have a different experience, we'd love to hear it. Go to the episode 57 post on gay sex and hookups. And I would say share your story. Share your story, though, in the PG to PG-13 range, somewhere in there. We do have a comment policy that prevents anyone from sharing kind of like super specific things. But no, like the general story, like I'd love to hear just like, anyone else's experience in hookup culture or experiencing gay sex for the first time, and just how that affected you physically, how that affected you emotionally, relationally. Love to hear those stories. So comment anytime on our podcast page.
Analogies to buffets and roller coasters are acceptable.
Yes, you're welcome, you guys. I started it.
Yeah, and a big shout out to washers and dryers hooking you up since 1937. I'm gonna say.
Nope.
I have no idea.
This is.
Don't look it up. Don't look it up. Washers and dryers, you've been hooking us up for a while. Thank you for the hookup. Y'all get a washer dryer today. I don't have one. I need a hookup.
Please, someone look up the origins of washers and dryers so they can correct Tom in the comments.
For real.
Yes, and then also, please start a petition to find out why USB was not the sponsor for this episode.
Right.
Anyway, Dean, Matt, thank you for coming back into the ring, into the arena. It's been too long. We should do this again soon.
We better do this again. I'm not going to wait for like 1 year and like couple of months.
Matt, I'll see you in 2022, and Dean, maybe I'll see you later this year.
I love how Matt knows like the exact amount of time, and I'm like, it was eventually like some time ago. I have no clue.
Several months, I don't know. But no, I appreciate y'all just joining tonight, sharing vulnerability. We had a lot of laughs as well. It's like that overcompensation that happens when you talk about something so serious, and then you have to like swing back and just be like super silly and ridiculous too to balance it all out. So my hope is that it didn't come across, whatever the edited version of all this is, that hopefully it didn't come across as crass or as like, not giving it the levity, or not giving it the what's the word? Levity, brevity. What's the word? The gravity. Maybe it's the gravity. Not giving it the gravity that it warrants. I think we're done throwing back episodes for a little while. We just did 2 back-to-backs, and so stay tuned for a new topic next time. To be determined. I'm sure it'll be great. We again appreciate all the support out there. Thanks for listening today. For all your other brothers, my name is Tom.
This is Dean. Hugs and kisses.
This is Matt. I hate you, Tom, right now.
And I'm reminding you, including you, Matthew, that you are not alone. Even the sparrow finds a home. See you next time, everybody.
Later.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to Your Other Brothers podcast. Navigate more with us at yourotherbrothers.com and comment on this episode at yourotherbrothers.com/podcast. Subscribe to our show to never miss an episode. And if you enjoy what we do, consider rating and reviewing us on iTunes. You can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Your Other Bros. If you'd like to further support our storytelling effort, consider becoming a Yobber. Yobbers pledge monthly and receive perks like calls with authors and other supporters, access to a secret Facebook group, and additional podcast content. Visit patreon.com/yourotherbros for more information. Don't miss our monthly bonus podcast on Patreon, The Yobbalog, featuring responses to previous podcasts, content not featured in public episodes, calls from listeners, and more. Ask us a question or tell us a story by leaving us a message at 706-389-8009. If you're new to the show, we'd love to hear from you. You can email us at podcast@yourotherbrothers.com. You can also write us at Your Other Brothers, P.O. Box 843, Asheville, North Carolina 28802. Until we journey next time, we're glad you're with us.